I dream of things that never were, and I ask, why not? George Bernard Shaw. Most people grow up by learning to doubt themselves. They are taught to be realistic, to fear failure, and to accept that some doors are simply not meant for them. And so, as the years go by, imagination, which once burned like a starry sky in childhood, is gradually replaced by lists of worries, of prejudices, and of voices constantly echoing, "That is impossible." But it is in the exact moment a person dares to ask, "Why not?" that a spiritual revolution begins. That is the question of those who refuse to live like dry leaves swept away by the winds of life. They look at what has never existed, the way an artist looks at a lifeless stone and foresees a sculpture waiting to be freed. Great inventions, voyages across oceans, and dreams once deemed pure madness. All began with a mind courageous enough to imagine what no one had ever seen. The world has always moved forward thanks to those who dare to step outside the boundaries of the possible. Not because they were certain of success, but because they understood that the greatest fear is not failure, but dying without ever having tried to live up to their true potential. People unconsciously build walls to protect themselves from pain. Many spend their entire lives in a comfort zone, like a prisoner falling in love with their chains, because at least they are familiar. But all miracles lie on the other side of that familiarity. When you dare to dream of what has never happened, you force your mind to expand beyond outdated maps. You no longer merely react to the world, you begin to create it. There is a fierce beauty in that spirit. It is like a flame roaring in the dead of winter, like a ship charging straight into a dense fog simply believing there is an undiscovered continent behind it. Those who carry the question, "Why not?" inside them are often seen as different, sometimes even reckless. But they are the very ones who set history in motion. They do not wait for the future to arrive, they pull the future toward themselves with faith, willpower, and imagination. People truly live not when they merely exist, but when they dare to envision a greater version of themselves. A dream that has never happened is not proof of its impossibility. Sometimes, it is merely an invitation for someone brave enough to make it a reality. Faith is a living, daring confidence in God's grace, so sure and certain that a man could stake his life on it 1,000 times. True faith has never been a weak emotion for those looking to escape reality. It is like a fire burning in the heart of someone walking through a storm who still refuses to kneel to despair. A living faith always has breath, a heartbeat, pain, and courage. It is not about closing your eyes to deny the darkness, but opening them wide in the dead of night and still deciding to walk forward. People often think power comes from control, from money, authority, or the ability to manipulate life. What truly keeps a person from collapsing is the feeling that they are not alone in this universe. Faith in God's grace is precisely that feeling, an invisible assurance, yet stronger than steel. It is like someone sinking in a freezing ocean but still swimming forward, believing there is land on the horizon. Those without faith are often crushed by tragedy because they see suffering as the end. But a person with faith views suffering as a crucible where the soul is heated to become purer. The strangest thing about faith is that it does not erase fear. Rather, it turns fear into fuel for hope. A person may tremble, cry, or be exhausted, yet still rise, because inside them exists a voice fiercer than all the chaos. I have not been abandoned. That is an extraordinary psychological strength that no sedative can ever replicate. Faith allows a person to endure the long winters of life without losing their heart. It gives them the ability to see the dawn even when the sky is still covered in gray ash. Perhaps the most beautiful thing about faith is not that it helps people conquer the world, but that it helps them not lose themselves within it. When someone dares to stake their life 1,000 times on God's grace, it means they have found a grounding deeper than any insecurity. And from that grounding, they do not just live, they shine. I don't think that we're meant to understand it all the time. I think that sometimes we just have to have faith. Nicholas Sparks. There are phases in life when people become obsessed with needing to understand everything. Why they suffer, why others leave, why good things shatter right when we need them the most. The human mind is like a compass, constantly spinning in a storm of questions, desperately trying to find order amidst chaos. Not every wound is healed by an explanation. There are things that, the more we try to dissect them with reason, the more we get lost in a labyrinth of doubt. And in that exact moment, faith becomes the invisible bridge guiding the soul across an abyss that logic could never span. Modern people often idolize control. They want every event to have a clear cause, every emotion to be analyzed like an equation. But life has never operated entirely on mathematics. There are long nights when the heart aches beyond words, goodbyes with no satisfactory explanation, and losses that arrive like a bitter wind sweeping across a lush green field. If people only allowed themselves to move forward once they understood it all, they would forever be trapped in the darkness of their own minds. Because not every door in life can be opened with the key of reason. Many doors only open with faith. Faith here is not some weak blindness, but the spiritual strength of someone who dares to walk even without seeing the complete path. It is like a sailor hoisting the sails amidst a thick fog, trusting that beyond the mist, the ocean and the shore still await. It is a psychological state where one stops fighting the uncertainty of life, stops forcing oneself to have all the answers, and begins to learn how to coexist with the unknown without falling apart. That alone creates the most profound maturity of the soul. Oftentimes, what exhausts us is not the suffering itself, but the endless battle to force that suffering to make sense immediately. But life is not a book that always flips to reveal the answers on the next page. There are meanings only understood years later and secrets that will forever remain beyond our comprehension. Faith becomes a form of inner peace, the peace of someone who accepts that they do not need to understand the entire sky to still love the light of the stars. Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. Corrie ten Boom. What exhausts us the most is not the present, but the obsession with tomorrow. Human beings can endure pain, deprivation, and even profound loneliness for a long period of time, yet they easily collapse under the feeling of not knowing what lies ahead. The future, in the eyes of many, is like a dark, endless corridor where imagination often conjures monsters far more terrifying than reality. And in that very moment, faith becomes the flame that keeps the soul from drowning in panic. The powerful contrast between an unknown future and a known God. Life is constantly shifting. People change, circumstances alter, and plans that seem solid as rock can crumble overnight. We try to control everything like a person using their tiny hands to hold back a rushing river. But the more we strive for absolute control, the more we are swallowed by anxiety. Because the very nature of life is uncertainty. The only thing that grants the soul true peace is not knowing what will happen next, but knowing you are guided by the unchanging one. Accepting your own finitude, yet remaining at peace. It is like a child sleeping soundly through a storm, not because they understand the weather, but because they trust in their Father's embrace. A person with faith is not someone who has never been afraid. They too tremble at loss and feel lost at life's crossroads. The difference is that they do not let fear govern their soul. They understand that life does not have to be completely clear to be worth continuing. There is a profound beauty in surrender. It is not the giving up of the weak, but the serenity of someone who has stopped fighting to control every wave on the ocean of life. Only when people stop trying to peer through the entire fog of the future do they realize they can live fully in the present. And strangely enough, the moment we lay our insecurities at the feet of faith, our soul becomes lighter and stronger. Because in the end, what saves a person from the dark is not knowing everything that will happen, but the faith that no matter what happens, they will never be forsaken. Faith is not opposed to reason. Sherwood Eddy. Wanting to believe means giving up thought, and wanting to think means losing faith. In truth, the conflict does not lie between faith and reason, but between the arrogance of the mind and the fear of the soul. People often fall into two extremes, either elevating reason to a supreme God, only believing what can be measured and proven, or plunging into blind faith as a way to escape reality. But true faith does not demand that we discard our intellect. It merely reminds us that reason, no matter how sharp, has its limits before the vastness of existence. Reason is like a flashlight in the dark. It clearly illuminates every footstep, every stone right in front of you. But faith is the belief that beyond the veil of night, dawn still awaits, even if that small light cannot reach the horizon. A person who lives entirely by reason is often trapped in the need to control everything. They want every pain to have an explanation, every event to follow logic, and every emotion to be analyzed like a formula. But human life does not operate entirely like a mechanical system. There are things the heart understands long before the brain can give them a name. There are moments of love, sacrifice, forgiveness, or hope that go far beyond the scope of ordinary measurements. The fascinating thing in psychology is that humans do not truly live on facts alone. They live on meaning. A person may possess all the evidence needed to exist, yet still fall into emptiness if they lose faith in something greater than themselves. Faith appears not to destroy reason, but to complete the parts that reason cannot touch. Like the wings of a bird, reason helps keep balance, while faith grants the ability to soar high. Without one or the other, a person will either plummet into the cold abyss of cynicism or drift away in blind fanaticism. The truth is greater than our capacity to comprehend it. They are not afraid to ask questions, but neither do they turn every mystery into a reason for despair. Use reason to seek, but use faith to keep walking when the path extends beyond the limits of understanding. And perhaps that is the most beautiful state of human balance, a mind that knows how to think and a heart that still has the capacity to believe. If you have never eaten while crying, you do not know what life tastes like. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. There are lessons in life not taught with words, but carved into the soul through cold meals in the middle of the night, when the throat chokes up with pressure, loss, or loneliness. The moment a person swallows food while trying to swallow their tears is when they come closest to the truest part of existence, where the strong facade crumbles, where there is no stage, no role to play, only a heart trying to survive just one more day. People often think that the greatest suffering is the sound of crying. No, the most painful thing is that life goes on even when your soul is shattering. You still have to eat, still have to go to work, still have to reply to messages, and still give a faint smile when asked, "Are you okay?" That is the silent tragedy of growing up. The world does not stop to wait for anyone to heal. And it is in those seemingly small moments, a slight tremble of chopsticks, a tear falling into a bowl of rice, a quiet gaze into the void, that a person realizes life is not only the sweetness of success or love, but also the saltiness of tears, the bitterness of helplessness, and the blandness of isolation. But oddly enough, those very tear-soaked meals mature the soul more profoundly than any victory. Those who have never hurt often view life through theories. They speak of hope as if reading from a beautiful book. But those who have eaten while crying understand hope differently, not as a brilliant halo, but as the strength to keep chewing a bite of food, even when the heart feels heavy as stone. That is a very quiet kind of courage. No one applauds, no one sees it, but it saves a person from breaking down. Anyone who has lived through such days will know how to cherish a peaceful meal, a simple laugh, an afternoon without the heavy weight of pressure. They understand that life is not a perfect paradise, but a blend of sweet nectar and ashes. And precisely because they have tasted the saltiness of tears, they can truly savor the sweetness of peaceful days. Perhaps that is what life has been quietly teaching us. Sometimes, the most painful moments are exactly what makes a soul deeper and more loving. If you are irritated by every rub, how will your mirror be polished? Everyone wants to be strong, to shine brighter in this life, but very few truly accept the process that creates it. Because growth has never been born out of comfort. A mirror cannot reflect light if it has never gone through painful polishing. And people are the same. It is the friction, the failures, the wounds, and the pressure that awaken the true depths within the soul. Human beings tend to run away from everything that makes them uncomfortable. Just a slight criticism, and they withdraw. Encountering just a minor setback, they immediately doubt their own self-worth. The moment life does not go as planned, they see adversity as a sign of misfortune. Like a rough block of metal wanting to become a sharp sword, yet terrified of the fire and the hammer. What makes a person beautiful is not that they have never been hit hard by life, but that after all the clashes, they still retain the light within their soul. The friction in life comes in many forms. Sometimes it is betrayal from the one you trusted most. Sometimes it is the feeling of being looked down upon, misunderstood, or rejected. At times, it is those days of being so utterly exhausted that you just want to give up everything. But these very things act like sandpaper on the mirror of the soul. They strip away the immature arrogance, the fragile illusions, and the easily shattered ego that people often cling to. A person who has never experienced friction often lives on the surface. They are quick to react, easily offended, easily broken. But someone who has walked through fire possesses a very different kind of calm. They no longer panic in the face of storms, because they know they were forged in those very storms. The mirror is polished not to endure pointless pain, but to reflect light more clearly. People are the same. Wounds do not necessarily turn us bitter. If we are mindful enough, they can make us more empathetic, deeper, and stronger. An unpolished soul usually only reflects itself. But a soul that has endured the friction of life gains the capacity to reflect truth, compassion, and the beauty of humanity. Perhaps the most terrifying thing is not being hurt by life, but living an entire life without daring to step into any friction in order to grow. Because an unpolished mirror will forever remain clouded. And a person who constantly runs from challenges will never see the most radiant version of themselves. Life was meant to be lived, and curiosity must be kept alive. One must never, for whatever reason, turn his back on life. Eleanor Roosevelt. The saddest thing is not that people die, but that they stop feeling life long before their death. There are those who still breathe, still work, still pass through the days like programmed machines, but their eyes no longer hold the spark of discovery. Their hearts no longer flutter at something new. They exist, but they are not truly alive. And it is curiosity, the primal instinct that makes us look up at the sky, ask questions, and step out of our comfort zone, that acts as the flame, keeping the soul from being buried in apathy. Curiosity is not merely a desire to acquire more information. It means the soul still harbors hope. A person who remains curious is someone who still believes there is something ahead worth exploring, beauty yet unseen, and meaning yet untouched. A child looks at the world with bright eyes because everything is magical. But upon growing up, many lose that ability. They allow failure, pain, and pressure to turn life into a sealed room with no windows. They stop asking questions, stop dreaming, stop trying new things out of fear of being disappointed once again. And that is when the soul begins to age, even if the body is still young. Never turn your back on life does not mean that life is always gentle. In reality, life is sometimes as cruel as the ocean in a storm. It takes away what we hold dear, pushes us into isolation, and makes us doubt our very own worth. But to turn your back on life means letting suffering rob you of your ability to feel. It is when people stop marveling at the sunrise, stop being moved by a melody, stop wanting to meet new people, stop believing that tomorrow can be different from today. Such a soul is no longer destroyed by adversity, but by paralysis from within. The miracle is that life always rewards those who hold on to their curiosity, even if their hearts have been broken many times. A person who is still curious will always have the capacity to be reborn. They might ache, but they still want to understand the world a little more. They might be disappointed, but they still want to love one more time. They look at life as a book not yet fully read, rather than a predetermined sentence. And it is exactly this attitude that builds human beings' fiercest vitality, the ability to keep walking with eyes that still know how to marvel. Life does not demand that we be constantly strong or endlessly happy. It only asks that we do not close our hearts to existence. Because as long as we remain curious, as long as we want to see one more horizon or listen to one more story, then deep down, that soul is truly alive. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. George Bernard Shaw. Society often praises the adaptable those who skillfully blend into the existing order, knowing how to bow to reality to survive safely. They are like water flowing along a riverbed, soft, steady, and avoiding collisions. But history has never been changed by currents that only flow within ancient molds. Every major turning point in humanity was initiated by people deemed unreasonable. Those who look at the limits of the world and say, "No, things don't have to be this way." Most people fear being different because the brain is always seeking safety. Adaptation is an ancient survival mechanism, blending into the crowd to avoid elimination. Yet that very mechanism breeds mental stagnation. A person who only adapts for too long will gradually lose the ability to ask questions. They accept injustice because that's just how life is, accept mediocrity because everyone lives like that, and accept invisible cages simply because they have existed for so long they appear natural. They exist in stability but create no motion. On the contrary, the unreasonable man is not a fool, but someone bold enough not to bow to present boundaries. They possess minds that make society uncomfortable by constantly breaking old rules. When the whole world believes something is impossible, they charge forward like madmen trying to smash through a wall with bare hands. They are the ridiculed inventors, the artists seen as eccentric, the thinkers branded as dangerous. But it is these very individuals who drag humanity out of its slumbering inertia. Without unreasonable people, humanity might still be living in the caves of archaic thinking. Interestingly, all great progress begins with dissatisfaction. Someone absolutely satisfied with the world will never change it. Only those who feel that reality is not good enough dare to dream of what does not yet exist. And that imagination, though initially seen as absurd, is the very seed of revolution. The airplane was once a crazy dream. Humans walking on the moon was once considered a delusion. Even the most monumental social changes were once deemed impossible until a few unreasonable ones refused to accept the status quo. Those who change the world often have to pay the price of loneliness. Because society always pushes back against anything that shakes its stability, the one ahead of their time is usually misunderstood before being praised. They are like a lightning bolt ripping through the night sky, causing terror before bringing illumination. Progress has never been a journey of comfort. It is the result of souls daring to carry a level of unreasonableness large enough to refuse living forever in the box the world has built. The greatest beauty of human beings lies in the ability not just to adapt to reality, but to recreate it. For if everyone were perfectly reasonable according to the standards of their time, no new horizons would ever be opened, and humanity would forever stand still in its own comfort zone. Wisdom comes from experience. Experience is often the result of a lack of wisdom. Terry Pratchett. Most of the profound things in life do not come from books, advice, or beautiful philosophies, but from the stumbles that make the soul ache terribly. People rarely truly learn when everything is going smoothly. We often only start to see ourselves clearly after we have erred, lost, trusted wrongly, and walked down paths that reason should have stopped us from taking. And that very fact creates a bitter truth. Mature wisdom is not born out of perfection, but from the consequences of unwise choices. When young, people often live under the illusion that they are an exception to every warning. Everyone thinks they will not love the wrong person, will not fail, will not be betrayed, and will not make the same mistakes as previous generations. That is an instinctual confidence of a youthful ego, both beautiful and dangerous. We listen to advice the way we listen to rain outside a window. It exists, but it doesn't truly touch us. Because the human brain has a peculiar trait. It receives information through reason, but only ingrains it through emotional experience. A lesson only truly becomes wisdom when it has passed through flesh and bone, through tears, through sleepless nights, and silent regrets. Experience is often born from a lack of wisdom. We rush into toxic relationships, mistakenly thinking we can save someone with our love. We spend time as if youth is infinite. We trust the wrong people, choose the wrong path, say words that should have remained unspoken, And then life responds with unavoidable collision. But the strange thing is, those mistakes, however painful, act like a refining fire. They burn away the naivety, the arrogance, and the beautiful yet fragile illusions. After each such time, we do not merely lose something, we also see another piece of truth about ourselves and life. A truly wise person is often not the one who has never been wrong, but the one who knows how to turn mistakes into depth. They no longer view life through overly simplistic eyes. They understand that the human heart is complex, that emotions can deceive reason, and that sometimes the rightest thing is the hardest to do. There exists within them a special kind of calm, not coldness, but seasoned experience. Just as someone who has weathered a storm will no longer panic at a few dark clouds, those who have tasted the consequences of a lack of wisdom learn to step slower, look deeper, and choose more carefully. Give people permission to be wrong. In a world where everyone wants to appear perfect, admitting that wisdom is often built on moments of foolishness makes us more authentic. It reminds us that failure is not proof of worthlessness, but the tuition fee for maturity. And perhaps the most valuable thing is not living a life free of mistakes, but having a soul brave enough to rise after every fall, with eyes that understand the world better than before.